So G2 had their first game with their new roster today against the Mongolz, and it was on Ancient and Inferno. And I think Inferno was a very interesting game because both teams are very heavy in terms of banana control, very often sending 3 players B. In fact, most of the rounds in this game, buy rounds, both teams send 3 players B. But they actually game plan very heavily around dealing with that. So G2 generally, and this is pretty much the same exact positions they had with Hooksy, if you're wondering. You've got Hunter in long haul, you've got Nico was actually the banana player, and because of a missed shot, 910 actually goes down. Now, still, Hunter's actually going to make his way out long haul very early on in the round here, and technically you don't necessarily know if the CTs have 3 players there, because one of the things that Mongolz do is they hold on to a lot of their utility, but with that aggression in middle, there's a maximum of 2 players now towards A, and one of them is wrapping back around arch side, and I believe Hunter actually knows that, so he's very comfortable just going for that peek out long haul, and this isn't something that you saw too often out of G2 previously in their earlier iterations. However, this is something that works really well against G2 and lots of teams have done against them because it is a really effective way to deal with teams that play 3B very often. Then into the 2v2, you actually get a free bomb plant. Not only that, you manage to get Hunter and Snacks in a pit, which is almost always the best setup you can get into. If you can ever double pit, it's almost always a good idea. The problem is when this nade somehow dunks Hunter for 54 damage, and then Snacks is kind of screwed at this point. There's really not too many places he could be, and they're just going to collapse on him entirely. But they did open up that round, losing a player at bottom middle, losing banana control, but still picking up a kill, and they got the information that it was a 3B stack. So I don't necessarily want to show this banana control every round because you're going to kind of get the picture once you see this round as well, but this is incredibly annoying to deal with, even with that smoke that G2 throw that's really pivotal in being able to have any chance of holding banana. But he's in a pretty good position. It's hard to get flashes that necessarily blind every angle. They're going to molly down and then double nade, and they will actually have Nico get away with the kill, but then a third nade pops in and takes down Nico. So even though he got the kill, and it wasn't a gimme by any means, he had to win a bit of a gunfight there, he still ends up losing his life, right? Even when it goes well, it still kind of goes poorly. Now, one of the things that needs to be kept in mind is when you lose this banana control battle, you do need to be kind of careful with it because you can't just let them stack 4A every round, just rotate off entirely. You have to have someone kind of come in a little bit later and take some control back if at all possible. And if anything, that molly that was just thrown car by Senzu does let G2 know that, you know, for sure the Mongols have given up top car control and they don't have to worry too much about anything other than just a full-on gamble. Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. You have Senzu here with the smoke and you have 910 with the op rotated in towards arch. However, Hunter is just in the perfect place at the exact right timing because he's going to be walking up as G2 go for the wrap. He's looking to catch anyone that's kind of in the open and line up this flash specifically, and in doing so he catches Mizinho at this exact perfect timing. Now, I want to actually show this clip though from Blitz that's actually insane because at first I thought, okay, look at the spacing. Is Monacy and Hunter, do they mess up the spacing here to allow Blitz to get a 2K? Well, Hunter throws this flash, Monacy spots him, and then Blitz just absolutely obliterates both kills. Yeah, Blitz just absolutely obliterates them. Then in the 1v3, I do really wish Snacks had just planted the bomb here. But if you're ever losing banana control, one of the ways you can try and combat that is with this type of play here. So Nico's already been pushed off banana. He put a little pressure early on, but at this point he knows that the Mongols have full control of bottom banana. They could potentially have walked the player down. And Monacy wants to try and take out the opper if 910 is opping towards B with a flash that unfortunately actually blinds him slightly, so he doesn't really accomplish the whole job. But what I'm interested in here is they're actually going to be taking mid control at the same time, and what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to have this situation where, well, the other team has they have 4A because they have full banana control. And so what Snacks wants to do here is he wants to go back. You're going to have Nico throw a Molotov for him that clears out both cubbies. Snacks is going to throw kind of a makeshift flash here for himself. Actually, Snacks is going to throw the molly, but he's going to throw a right-click flash to get through, clear out close, and he doesn't really want to go too much further than that, but unfortunately, one of the angles he wants to push off there was the angle 910 was holding, and in being unable to do so, that means that they're kind of just pressured into an A hit in somewhat of an uncomfortable position. Now, it actually kind of worked, because while it didn't fully rotate multiple players, you'll notice that even Senzu partially rotates off before deciding, well, there's only 20 seconds left and we have a decent rotate coming in, so I can actually stay towards Arch, and then he re-aggresses at the exact right timing, where if nobody was there, he could even consider quickly rotating to B right afterwards. Instead, there are 2 players there, he shoots them in the back, and you have Mongolz winning another round based off of that banana control early. So a couple rounds later, G2 are going to try and change up the strategy a little bit, because while they have 1 round win outside of Pistol, it felt like not a round that you could necessarily replicate. So they want to try and go for a fast play up banana and try and send in Snacks quickly to car to catch players with nades in their hands, but unfortunately for them, Mongolz have a pretty good idea of what might be coming, and they actually toss their nades down a little earlier than usual. In fact, they were holding on to their nades quite a while in a lot of the most recent rounds, and in this case, Snacks gets double naded right at the very beginning of this one, down to 35 health. But with Nico there in support, molly corner, Nico's actually going to hit a really nice shot onto Senzu. Senzu's aware this peek could be coming through, but I think he's a little more worried that someone's going to get flashed through the front of the smoke, or the smoke is about to dissipate, and in that situation, Nico actually ends up getting a kill over half wall. And that makes this a really awkward situation for the Mongolz entirely. Now, G2 are actually going to rush this execute. So instead of trying to kind of wait around, I think with the way this was being played, this really does look like 2 players B. This is something G2 do all the time. They have, 1 player corner, 1 player sandbags. There wasn't an extra flash or anything thrown to support after that first player died. It really looks like a solo B hold. So I think G2 just want to try and rotate over and execute quickly on that solo B, on the solo B player that's left over. But unfortunately, they don't do it quite quickly enough, which means Blitz gets here in time to get 2 kills for himself. And because it's a rushed exec, so what happens here is there's clearly a bit of miscommunication, and I think what actually happens is Techno 4K, I think Mongolz might hear him scope in. And then Mongolz is like, well, I can't cross this angle because I bet he's opping down here, right? I don't want to cross this angle. So he pulls out a smoke of his own, even though Hunter is already, in the position, he's probably the guy that should be throwing the smoke, or clearly this is the type of situation where a new player is gonna make a big difference. You're in the round's kind of breaking down, you're trying to do something that you're probably not used to doing all that often, and the protocols aren't there to say who's throwing the smoke and at what moment, and that means Mongolz and Hunter were both throwing a smoke. Now, if Mongolz was throwing that smoke and Hunter came through to support, Hunter most likely trades, and if Mongolz just has a gun out and does a bit of movement to try and catch that opper if the opper's walking forward, I think that, well, they don't get double killed. Unfortunately, that miscommunication ends up losing them the round. In the final run of the half, I actually wanted to show one kind of cool thing here, because that looks like a pretty deep smoke in banana, and it absolutely is. Now, sometimes you can actually kind of catch players with that type of smoke by, swinging on them with rifle, but you've got this time around, Senzu's going to be peeking out with an op, gets the kill onto Nico, and he's going to get kind of caught off guard here in a second by Monacy. Now, what ends up happening is that Snacks is going to throw a flash here, and that flash allows Monacy through in theory, but Monacy actually moves through on the right side, which is really the problem with this type of smoke, because there's this big gap where Monacy can get right here, and nobody knows he's here, in theory, and he can get a really nice peek out onto Senzu, who's also not ready at all at that exact moment. Senzu was trying to do like the half wall jump and got completely caught off guard. And then Monacy just hits yet another nice shot to essentially secure the round here. I mean, it's 5v3 now. Bliss is going to be rotating in, but he's pretty much desperate. And if he could get more than one, then maybe they have a chance. But now into a 3v1, odds are pretty terrible for them to actually get anything done. And if you look at the half, this is a 7-5 half for the Mongols. I mean, both teams should be, I think, relatively happy with this. But, you know, G2, they only won 2 actual gun rounds, and one of those gun rounds is this, where they opened up 4v5, and then Senzu just got kind of caught off guard on the wrong timing, where he's trying to jump up on the car to jump on a half wall, and gets caught in the air. It's not like G2 really had any major outplays. It felt like Mongols were really getting the better of them. So in this series, G2 actually win 3 of 4 pistol rounds, and this is the pistol round they lose, but they're going to turn it directly back around by winning the following round. And part of that is going to be this flash. Nico actually throws a flash from Banana here that blinds both players from the Mongols that are trying to hold T-stairs, because they both actually go for a peek out from Banana together. That means they're both blind, and as Mongolz swings with Hunter behind him, they catch both players with absolutely no ability to defend themselves on T-stairs, and just instantly kind of turn this round on its head into a 5v2 after losing pistol. So later in the broadcast, it was mentioned that G2 were going for kind of an old school style of anti-eco, and that's really because of this round here, where it's just a straight B-rush from the Mongols, and they're going to kind of catch G2 throwing utility. You know, Hunter had just thrown a molly, he backed up, Nico wasn't quite ready yet. Their protocols maybe aren't in place quite yet to deal with this exact round, and it ends up with Snacks being completely alone, while Hunter and Nico seem to want to be trading positions here. And because of that, you end up really just getting absolutely run over. And even you have Hunter, this is kind of unfortunate because Hunter really is in position to mop it up here. All right, Nico's gonna die, Snacks is dead, 4 players are swinging on him, and they're not ready at all. Some of them pull their nades out. But somehow, unfortunately, he doesn't get a single kill, which basically means it's time to save. So in the previous round, the Force Buy wars were kind of destroyed. As G2, they actually lose rounds back to back, which ends up with them being on a save. And this is one of the most ambitious rounds I've seen, because G2 is going to go for a 4-man ace, or B stack rather, and Mongolz is still going to go aggressive here in towards alt mid regardless. And the timing of the play he makes, they actually can't see him get into this position from where exactly they're holding. So he gets behind this wall, and he's just going to wait for a timing to actually peek out and catch Mzinho falling back. And that's not really a play you're expecting a player to make when they're in a solo A setup. So you're really expecting a lot of the time that a pivot might be made where Mongols quickly rotate over to B and try and hit it right away. But the fact that they didn't might suggest to G2 that they weren't in a setup to actually make their way over to B in enough time. You know, they were either in alt middle or they were looking to retake alt middle like they did here. And that's just going to end with Mongols walking into another stack. I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that G2 know the Mongols do, where they hit B a lot early on these types of anti-ecos or anti-force buys, and then they hit A late on a lot of these sorts of rounds, because they're just fully stacked into this setup. And the funny thing is, this hold really shouldn't go well, because Mongolz is going to die, and then Nico just gets 2 kills from Pit with the USP, which is possibly the only time anyone has ever said that outside of Pistol Round. Really, that should not have gone well. And then unfortunately for 9-10, he actually just runs into sight looking the wrong direction, because, I mean, there's a lot of angles you have to clear, and he chose the wrong way, leaving Hunter in a 1v1 with just a massive advantage, as Blitz has no time, and he's going to win the 1v1. So like I said before, G2 is a very 3B heavy team, and they're going to open up the very first gun round of the game with a 3B setup to try and get full banana control. And on the other side, you have Mongols kind of setting up to counter that. They're going for not that dissimilar from what G2 themselves did, which is they're going to be lurking up long haul. They've got 3 players ready in middle though, and they're going to try and bust out together. Problem though is that Mongols have to deal with m0NESY. So m0NESY hears them running up early, falls all the way back. Mongolz gets 1, and then m0NESY is just going to over deliver. He's going to get the first player jumping out. He's going to make it hard for himself to die, and the molly is going to get the second kill for m0NESY, turning it into a 3v2. And unfortunately, you know, Mongols want to put some pressure onto G2 by planting the bomb. Maybe they'd have a chance, but 9-10 has to jump all the way back up to get the bomb, which gets him killed by Snacks on the flank and essentially secures the round for G2. Now, when I mentioned before about an old school style of anti-eco, this is what I was talking about. And this is something that Machine mentioned to Sponge. This is an old school anti-eco where you just play back on site. In theory, you have better crossfires, you're in a better position to hold the hit, and you're just going to make sure that you don't give your opponents any free guns. You don't give them any openings, right? If you stack 3B like G2 did in the previous anti-eco, well, in theory, if they go A, you have a hard time. In reality, if they go B, also apparently you're going to have a pretty hard time. But in this case, if your opponents just have a fairly light eco, they don't have a lot of utility, they prioritize deagles because they're expecting you to be a little bit more spread out, then if you actually go for that type of setup, you're just going to destroy them entirely. However, there are counters to that, which is why teams don't play like that, and you'll see it a little bit later. On this round in particular, if you think about the last gun round, G2 had 3B, but they still held the A hit, which means there's not much reason for them not to be 3B again, and Mongolz are going to read that and decide to just absolutely rush directly to the A site. But the problem is that also isn't going to work for them, which puts them in a really horrific spot strategically if you think about it, because they're against 3B, you're going to have a hard time controlling Banana, so you want to be able to punish at A. And G2 actually did a pretty good job of that, despite not winning all that many rounds doing so. And you know, the Mongolz, they had a couple pretty solid ideas on how to deal with that setup 3B, and they went horribly wrong. So you're getting kind of desperate here, because countering 3B by going Banana oftentimes just gets you destroyed by nades. Now, so I actually canceled the recording and then went and made a video on this specific round, so I'm not going to go over it too much here. You can check out that video if you want to on Mongolz beating G2 with Glocks. Really, they had 2 Glocks in this round, but the idea is because they know G2 was playing so passive, and they're trying to sniff it out here. Now, one of the things that I might have not shown, but that happened, is that in the previous round where G2 played really passive, they did this exact same top Banana retake util. And in this case, I think Mongolz has an idea. Well, if they don't throw that, maybe they're playing more aggressive, maybe they're fighting for top Banana, but then they throw that and they go, well, now we know they're almost certainly playing passive. And last time they were playing off of mid, so they're probably, you know, we're going to check if they're playing on mid. Okay, they're playing off of mid. That means they're almost certainly going to be playing a player in big pit. This is almost universally in these types of situations. You're going to have a player in big pit or a player on balcony or both. A lot of the time, G2 likes to play both. And Hunter now ends up in mini pit. And you have 2 players come over the top. In fact, actually 9-10 jumped over the cart in order to come over the top to trade onto Hunter. And it's just an incredibly well-played round in terms of setting it up and just how quickly they adapted, you know, because it's so interesting to me that it takes years, you know. It wasn't until really SK was the first team, I think, that fully realized, you know, teams are just going to exec on us if we play this passive. Because, you know, I remember in 2015, you could run a second round force where you bought full utility and like P250s, and teams would just give up Banana, and then you just exec B, and it's almost impossible to hold with like 3 mollies, you know? But they figured it out over the course of a single game. Not even a single game, a single half. Now, there's actually a lot of things that are going to go on in the following round that are important to note, because Mongolz have to change things up. This A hit, the response, trying to catch 2 players on A has not worked, so they're going to send Senzu to try and get Banana control. And G2 throw this smoke here that's a little shallower than the one Mongolz was throwing, which means it's a little harder to abuse the way G2 abused, but you can edge this smoke. And so Senzu can stay right here, and as soon as the molly and logs goes down, he can walk through and get into position. And Snacks and Nico, they want to play a setup where Snacks makes contact and Nico trades. Now, they are aware maybe someone could be here, but this is a spot they double molly. They wanted to deal with this because it's almost impossible to trade with this setup if they're in logs. And unfortunately for G2, not only does Snacks die, but Snacks had the utility there as well. They didn't want to give away Snacks' position by having him throw the smoke, so Nico threw it, and that means that G2 have almost no utility. Now, on the other side of the map, I'm going to rewind this a little bit. Mondesi started in apartments because what has Mongolz done? Well, they've attacked mid a couple of times. It's gone pretty poorly for them. So you might respond to that by then attacking apartments. And if we think about what G2 was doing, they were doing basically the same thing where they were trying to counter the 3B by fighting in long haul. And again, this is something that I've seen teams do fairly to pretty good success against G2 in the past. And having Mondesi op here, it's a big risk, right? Because you want your op to be more active usually, but it's going to work perfectly when your opponents are getting desperate and the mid plays haven't been working out for them. So Mondesi gets that kill, and he knows the immediate reaction. Either they're going to go quickly up middle, which they're not doing. They were just searching things out. This is kind of Mongol's style. They try and search out where the stack is, but unfortunately for them, it means that G2 immediately re-aggresses mid, knowing that that B response is almost certainly coming out, and all Nico has to do is try and delay as long as possible for Hunter to make the rotate. And what started as a 4v5 ends up with G2 winning the round with 4 players alive, which by the way is actually kind of key because they are really broke. So after beating the Forest, there's really no reason for G2 not to triple B again. And Mongolz, eventually they're going to have to test the actual control of Banana. G2 did it a lot earlier in the half, I believe, but Mongolz haven't tested really this Banana control in any serious way. And G2 have been layering a bit differently than Mongolz. Mongolz really made it very hard to come through the smoke at any time. G2 have this where they've thrown all of their nades, they've thrown a couple of mollies already. You know, there's this gap where Mongolz now can try and contest Banana, so they're going to do exactly that. However, Nico's here to get one, and Snacks gets dinked, but they don't realize it. They think they've cleared this corner with that spam, but they haven't. And then Hunter, who was actually rotating away, because of that little bit of extra time that Snacks bought, just by, you know, catching a couple of players, Hunter makes his way into this position. They're thinking he's probably CT, not here. Hunter manages to get the kill. He could probably back up. He gets around this corner. The problem is Blitz hears that Hunter doesn't fall all the way back. So Blitz now knows Hunter's close. And 3v1, usually you want to fall back and play out the 3v1. Unfortunately, Hunter tries to take, he tries to take what is a pretty solid engagement with an off angle there. But Blitz hears it, so he pre-fires him. And now it's a 1v2 that's actually fairly winnable. Just as a general rule, a 2-player advantage is almost unlosable. A 1-player advantage, you can play well and still lose, which is exactly what's going to happen here, because Mongolz is trying to play really safe, which is fair, but sometimes you can play a little bit too safe. It ends up giving Blitz the bomb plant, and then not only that, but Blitz can now get out of sight, and now they have to worry about every angle. This is terrifying. And Mondesi, so Blitz can basically be anywhere. This is kind of nightmare scenario. And I think Mondesi, he knows that Blitz could get out, but the problem is Blitz could be anywhere along this wall. He's not necessarily going to be in this exact position. So Mondesi comes out, he's not hard clearing that angle, and Blitz just hits a nice quick shot. And then Blitz is going to catch Mongolz off guard. Mongolz thinks Blitz would fall back half wall. Instead, Blitz catches him with a nade out, and we go into OT. So in a lot of this game, it feels like the Mongolz had a lot of really solid opening plays that would get them 5v4s, and then G2 would kind of bail themselves out with some individual plays. And this is one of those rounds, because Snacks is going to get triple naded on the corner here, taken down. But you still have Nico and Mondesi towards B, and Nico is still comfortable taking this engagement and just fighting it out towards top Banana rather than falling back. And it's going to end up with him getting a kill, but not only that, he sticks around and he gets more aggressive after finding that kill, which allows him to get the information that Senzu's falling off of Banana, that spam from all the way back near T stairs, and then Mondesi's just going to rotate his way over to A, and you'll end up in a reasonably good 3A stack in a 4v4. This is basically the situation you want to be in, although Mondesi is only on 15 health. Now, Hunter wants to get some information or get some control back, but unfortunately the peek on a Mizinho there just wasn't that effective. If I show it from Mizinho's POV, Mizinho does not hit a really nice shot here. He just kind of gets the better of Hunter, and that's going to happen sometimes. It will actually somewhat bait Mongolz into hitting towards the A site, and Nico's just immediately going to he's gonna full gamble on that. He's just gonna make his way over to A. I mean, you have Mondesi with 15 health. If they hit A and you only have 2 players there, you're probably losing. And then Mizinho is kind of awkward because he's in apartments, but he's also a player with most of the util on Mongolz. So he wants to get a little bit further forward to be able to use that utility, but in doing so, he's just going to end up taking a duel against Mongolz that not only ends with him dying, but it really confirms that Mongolz are hitting A. But in this case, Mongolz just gets the better of Mizinho, and that leaves them in a really terrible situation. And then Nico, another individual play here, throws the molly that fakes like he can't peek out, so they look away, but unfortunately for them, there's a gap in front of it. He peeks out and gets the 2K. So the way Mongolz play in OT, I think, is really smart in that they do a lot of these gimmick plays. They had that triple nade towards top banana. They're going to do this play. It's very similar to the Zywoo play, but they're actually going to boost up on barrels and spot over, and then full blind, or at least partially blind, 9-10 manages to take down Nico. That's just a great gimmick play to get themselves a kill. So yet again, you have a 5v4 opening for the Mongolz. Unfortunately, yet again, that 5v4 is going to get traded back as Senzu's spamming through the smoke. Snacks takes him down. And then this round is actually going to somehow end up in a 1v1. And Mondesi is just going to do the job. So final round of the game, yet again, Mongolz are going to have a really successful banana hold, but G2 show why long haul is important, why they had Mondesi multiple rounds. They had Mondesi holding that long haul angle with an op, why they're constantly worried about it, have players starting on balcony all the time. Well, this is why both teams were so worried about this, because you allow these players to walk up long haul, and you're just, because you started 3B, either Techno 4K is not in Arch, which means Arch is completely open, and this type of like lurk can be very effective. This is the type of lurk you'll see players like Mongolz, Nico go for, or you have this player, so either you have him not on Arch, and Arch is a weakness, or you have him on Arch, in which case the entire A site is a weakness. And if you come up lane, oftentimes this player will be able to pivot back into site, but because they're coming through apartments, that pivot is really shut down. So really the only player they have to worry about is Mizinho, and a good flash out puts him in a terrible position. They quickly get in a pit, trade on him, and the player Moto, who's not really ready for that but needs to pivot back to support, is just not able to do so. It just puts them in this amazing position to get a lot of control. And it's funny that this actually happens on the final round of the game, because all game long it's been like both teams have been so worried about long haul, and almost incorrectly so, right? Like it feels like they were worried about long haul for nothing. That right there is why they were worried about long haul. That's the type of play you have to be concerned about when you're losing. When you lose banana control, you can go for that type of play, and your opponents, it's hard to rotate back into a setup that can deal with that very effectively. Anyways, this is a cool game. I'm getting it out a bit late because specifically I stopped recording this to put out that other video, and then I was like, well, I may as well finish this because I was already more than halfway through. So here we are.